Avoidants who pull away after a moment of deeply shared vulnerability or intimacy. Hey guys, I'd like to talk to you about something a bit more difficult today. Lately, I've worked with a lot of clients that have had devastating experiences of building a really strong connection with a partner who then suddenly pulled away. And when I say intimacy, I don't strictly mean physical. It can also just be a really deep emotional intimacy. And so I'm going to help you guys make sense of these moments, both by drawing from my own experiences as a relationship coach with hundreds of client stories, but also as a former avoidant myself. Hi, I'm Gabriel. I run the website simplytogether.co with my wife, Carolina, and we're here to help you guys mend your relationships. So first off, what do I mean when I talk about your avoidant pulling away suddenly after a moment of vulnerability or intimacy? I'm talking about moments similar to what my wife and I had almost 13 years ago, where at the beginning of our relationship, I was a lot more unsure of my feelings towards her and was overcome by the usual doubts avoidants have around commitment. But more specifically, whenever we had a more intense time together, that could be in duration or just in intensity, it wasn't uncommon for me to become less responsive and unavailable afterwards. For example, shortly after our 2-week road trip across Europe in 2014, where we shared many very special moments and adventures together, including a broken spring 30 minutes into our journey, and we passed through the Austrian Alps, Switzerland, Italy, and Croatia. After all that, I distanced myself and became less responsive for a week or two. So this and other experiences where I would pull away after so much special time together with Carolina left her feeling like the moments we shared were inconsequential, that they couldn't be relied upon as proof of our relationship being stable. Though she handled these moments very well, I would still say this example of ours was not a severe case compared to some of my coaching client stories that I want to share with you guys. They are, of course, entirely anonymized. So I want to get to some more concrete examples about avoidance pulling away after deep connection or intimacy, ranging from the more mild to the very severe, and explore why they do this so that you are in a better position to deal with it and don't need to overthink or worry should it happen to you. So the first case is where an avoidant will develop feelings that they didn't plan for. In this example, I want to talk about Amelia's and Thomas's case. So they met on a dating app. He said he wasn't looking for anything serious from the get-go. But when they met, there was really great chemistry, a deep connection, a shared passion for music and art. And they spent hours upon hours talking together. They had infrequent contact and met every other week over the course of about 3 months. But after one long get-together, it was clear that there was a lot more going on because Thomas opened up about many of his struggles in life, fears he had, what was weighing on him, and actually confided some vulnerable secrets. And, Amelia was really supportive. She was there for him, she listened, and was that shoulder he could really lean on. The next week, however, he didn't respond to her texts and eventually just reiterated he wasn't looking for a relationship. So what happened? Why throw away this kind of amazing connection? It's because he caught himself becoming more attached and invested than he initially expected or planned to. Avoidants can be in denial of their own feelings and believe they have to be in control. And they're unsure and totally unprepared of those moments where they are suddenly not in control and attachment develops. So when they're not expecting these feelings and they do eventually come up, to them it's sudden and out of the blue. And they're afraid that your connection that you share could lead to something more serious that they don't feel ready for. So they pull away to slow things down, or in some cases, to stop them entirely. So this is one of the reasons why avoidants pull away after deep vulnerability or intimacy. Now, another reason can be that they had other priorities in life. So Laura was 32, Ben about 35. They met on Hinge. He was working at a startup, going to the gym almost every day, always working really hard, grinding. Meanwhile, she was training as a nurse and was actually pretty busy too. Now, they two connected really well. They had deep, meaningful conversations and a very strong emotional connection. They shared interests, astronomy, documentaries. They had a similar worldview. and they met about every 10 days over the course of 5 months and did actually text frequently. At one weekend, when they spent 2 full days together, where there was a lot of fun time, they cuddled, cooked, talked about their childhood, past relationships, and also future dreams and aspirations, Ben actually opened up about pressure and afraid of failing and burnout. And at one point, he even said, "Sometimes I feel like if I slow down, everything will just fall apart." Now, Laura reassured him and said, "You don't have to carry everything alone. I'm here. We can do together," etc. But after that weekend, things changed. His replies became a lot slower. He had more excuses about being really busy, work was crazy, he was exhausted. And 2 weeks later, he told her, "I really like you, but my job has to come first. I can't give this relationship the space it deserves." The deep weekend made him realize the relationship was no longer casual. In his mind, it started competing with his career. So he must have began thinking, if I commit to this, I'll lose focus of what's important to me. I won't pursue my career the way I really need to and put my full attention to it. So he interpreted his feelings as a distraction, and attachment to her felt like increasingly a loss of control, almost like a threat to his independence. So he chose the safe option of work, goals, and more emotional distance. Now, I'm not saying that having ambition is bad per se. It's just when you're using work as an excuse, as a form of emotional armor that they're hiding behind, avoidance can then sabotage an otherwise good relationship where they could have pursued their career and the relationship together. And in fact, the relationship could have informed and supported his ambition and pursuit of that career. But when avoidance hide behind productivity, they do it so that they don't have to feel vulnerable. So when it became clear there was more going on here with Laura, he just experienced it as pressure, which is, of course, a pity. Also, for those of you that are willing to share, I'm always curious. Let me know what happened in your situation before your avoidance started pulling away. Did you share a very special evening together? Did you have some connection, or did they maybe open up more than they ever had before? Let me know in the comments if you're willing. So another reason they might pull away after connecting very deeply is that they feel too seen and emotionally exposed. Let's take the example of Margaret, who was in her late 60s, Daniel, early 70s. They met at a community book club, and both of them had actually lost their long-term partners many years ago. So neither of them was actually looking for a serious relationship at the time. They just wanted companionship, a friend, someone to talk to, someone to go on walks with. And they started really slowly. Coffee after meetings, walks in the park, some weekend lunches here and there. But over time, it became a real relationship. Now, on the surface, Daniel was kind and steady, but he had never actually explored emotional depth very much. It wasn't something he was particularly familiar with. Margaret, on the other hand, was very emotionally intuitive. She asked thoughtful questions, she noticed patterns, she reflected things back to him. And one day she said, "You know, I think you've spent a whole life being strong for everybody else, but nobody ever really took care of you." This made Daniel feel very seen. He was quiet, and later actually admitted, "Nobody's ever told me that before. Nobody ever helped me see it from that perspective before." And so for the first time, he had this experience of feeling deeply seen. And initially, it seemed that he really enjoyed it. But then it seemed that it actually seemed to terrify him, as though he felt emotionally naked, like all of his defensive walls suddenly evaporated. And that was just a situation he was not comfortable being in. And lo and behold, shortly after, he started saying things like, "I'm this tired lately, I need more time," and had varying excuses. And after a month of distancing himself, he just said, "I don't think I'm cut out for this, and I can't, I need space." So although they shared this very real and intimate moment, because he had never felt so emotionally visible before, it was totally uncharted territory for him and really freaked him out to a point where he would rather back out of the relationship than experience that kind of vulnerability again. Something about it just made him feel exposed and powerless. And in this example, the avoidant chose fear over love. Now, as you've been listening to these stories, and I'm thinking, that sounds an awful lot like my situation, actually, with someone pulling away right after things felt more connected and special. There are many ways to go about this. If the situation doesn't resolve itself within a week, maybe two, then you're probably cycling on the spot. And in an effort to get unstuck, you might want to check out our Attached Avoidant program, which is for people who are dealing with avoidant partners or even exes who don't want to chase, beg, or lose themselves in trying to fix things. Instead, my wife and I teach you how to communicate in a way that makes avoidance feel safe with, how to lower their defenses, and how to rebuild connection gradually without triggering all those withdrawal responses. I'll drop a link in the video description for those of you that are curious. Now, another reason that avoidance might pull away after a deep connection or vulnerability is that they have unresolved trauma that gets triggered. Let's talk about Mark and Susie for this. They had been together for over 2 years. They lived together, traveled, shared routines, built a real life. And from what Mark could tell, everything was going great. Susie was a reliable character, very calm, but emotionally guarded. She rarely talked about her past. Mark, on the other hand, was more warm, expressive, and emotionally open. And over time, he wanted more emotional and physical closeness. But there was something kind of nagging at him for a while. Though they were so close and they spent so much of their routine and time together, something was still missing. There was emotional closeness lacking, even in the physical closeness moments. So one day he tried expressing this to her. I love you, but sometimes I feel like you're physically here, but emotionally somewhere else. And I just want to feel closer. Like, what's going on? Now, Susie agreed and actually said, "You're right. I have my mind elsewhere. I'll try. And I want us to be closer too." It also led to a deeper conversation where they figured out what Susie's roadblocks were and how they could go about making her feel safe enough to be more emotionally available. But the very next day, Susie became a whole lot more irritable and avoided conversations. She stayed up late on her phone, worked longer hours, and became emotionally less available. So what Mark didn't know was that Susie had grown up in a chaotic home where emotional closeness had always led to conflict. When people got close, someone got hurt, someone exploded, and someone also left. So she saw intimacy and emotional closeness as danger, that it would lead to something bad. When Mark had asked for that deeper connection, it unfortunately unlocked some old wounds that Susie chose to not communicate, or maybe was not even aware of. And on some level, she must have believed she's just going to get hurt. So she pulled away. And when confronted, she just said, "I don't know what's wrong with me. I just feel overwhelmed. I need space." So her vulnerability triggered some unresolved emotional trauma. And the emotional closeness just felt really unsafe to her, to a point where she just defaulted to her childhood survival coping mechanisms in this instance. In cases like this, the avoidants are not afraid of love in and of itself. They're afraid of what the love means about their past, because it sheds a light on things that have been buried. And intimacy then activates those memories and they shut down. This is another way in which avoidants pull away after vulnerability or intimacy. Now, the last example I want to talk about is external pressure from family. Let's go over Avery and Chan's story. They were together for 4 years. Both lived in the US, worked in IT, and actually had a strong emotional and intellectual connection. Though they didn't live together, they had very intense long weekends and also longer vacations at the time. Now, Chan had really strong family ties in Hong Kong, and there was a lot of responsibility there towards his family and the family business. And his family actually openly stated they would prefer if he married someone from their culture, that it would be better, that would make things easier. Despite this, he and Avery were actually very close. And he told her things like, "If I stay in the US, we're getting married. You're my future, and I've never loved someone like this before." So there was a lot of reassurance and words of affirmations that he gave Avery. Then he had to go to Hong Kong, and after that trip, everything changed. He became hesitant and distant. He started saying things like, "You wouldn't understand the pressure. my family would never accept this, we have too many cultural differences, and just utterly avoided the topic of the future. So in this case, his family exerted a lot of pressure to a point where he was doubting his own feelings towards Avery that were very clear to him when it was just the two of them. But when the external factor came into play with family expectations and pressure, their special connection was essentially sabotaged. Now, Avery had actually also applied pressure of her own to say, why aren't we doing this? Why does it have to be either or? But Chan experienced this as pressure from both sides now to make a choice to a point where he didn't know what he wanted anymore. And instead of confronting this directly, he just emotionally withdrew. So for avoidance, external pressure like this, in combination with emotional intimacy, can feel like a trap of sorts or an obligation at some point. They're so afraid of disappointing either side that they just choose neutrality and leave the whole relationship, sometimes on both ends, as in the romantic relationship and the family relationship, in total limbo. They're just looking for an escape and don't want to face anything. So this is the final way in which avoidants pull away after vulnerability or intimacy. Now, I know all of this can sound really heartbreaking, and I've only highlighted the concept point within each one of these cases here. Not all of them ended here. Some of them actually have a very happy end where these very conflicts were resolved. But I at least wanted to give you guys this piece of acknowledgement that you see that if you are going through something similar, it is not uncommon. It is attached to avoidant behaviors and patterns, but there is a lot you can do about it. So don't feel despair or hopeless here. In fact, for those of you that are in a similar situation like this, I'm sure you'd be curious to watch my other video where I talk about what makes avoidance choose you, specifically why I chose my wife. And here I go over the key qualities that make avoidance go from pulling away to finally committing to and choosing. And of course, if this video helped you understand your situation a bit better, please give it a like. And if you know someone who's stuck, loving an emotionally unavailable partner, send this to them. It might just save them months of confusion. All right, guys, I'll see you in the next one. Take care.